Btol was a very young girl from the Republic of Ireland 40 years ago when she embraced Islam. A very interesting story. We're going to her house here in this village of Markfield to hear it from her. Sister Btol, your journey to Islam started well over 40 years ago. How was it? How did it start?
40 years is a long time. And it's almost sometimes difficult to remember some of the different circumstances and situations that were in vogue at that particular time. But I was born into a farming family in Ireland. We were a family of 10 children.
The Republic or Northern Ireland?
The Republic.
The Republic.
Yes, the Republic of Ireland. There were 10 children, and I was the first of 6 girls after 3 boys. So I was, I guess I was the daddy's girl, I was long awaited, the first girl after 3 boys and so on. So there was great excitement and so on and so forth. So yeah, it was we were a Catholic family. My parents were very dedicated Catholics. We went to church. We actually prayed together in the evenings as we grew up. I remember we were all summoned to pray the rosary, which was a specific prayer from a Christian perspective. And we all joined in. And, and prayer and religious was all very significant, as I was growing up. We went to church regularly. And we went as a whole family. My parents would sometimes, my dad would go to church earlier on the Sunday morning, and my mum would look after the little kids. And then my dad would stay at home, and she would go to the later service and take some of us children as well. And he'd look after the little children. But it was very much a collective effort all the time. So faith and spirituality and God consciousness was very much part of my upbringing. So then I went to boarding school, and we were taught by nuns. And that was very significant for me because I really respected the religious order, and I really respected the nuns in their sense of deep and meaningful spirituality. And they used to have various different times of the day when they would have collective prayers and collective spiritual meditation and so on. And I used to listen to that a lot because they used to sing and chant, and I really loved it. And I also was a member of the choir. So when I was in boarding school, we went to Mass every single morning. And then we went twice on Sundays because being in the choir, I had to be there in order to sort of sing and perform at both services on the Sunday morning. So again, it was very religiously oriented. And I know that coming from Ireland, there's been a lot of problems and concerns that have been expressed over the years historically about religious abuse and sexual abuse of children and so on. But I have to say that for me, we never experienced anything like that. And my time in boarding school was an absolute joy. In fact, I think we did less work and more, playing around and getting into mischief all the time. But anyway, I mean, as it came towards the end of, when I was in boarding school for about a year, 2 years, my father became very ill, and he suffered a heart attack. He was about 53 at the time, and my youngest sister had just been born that very same year. She was born in the end of January, and he had his heart attack in August of that year. And of course, that was hugely, it was a huge blow to my mum and to the whole family, really, because there were 10 children. A lot of them were very young, very little at the time. And she was distraught. My mum was distraught. She didn't know what was going to happen. Lots of the neighbours and lots of the the family, my uncles and so on, came in. And, you know, of course, in August time, you'd be saving the hay, you'd be getting it into the sheds for the winter, for the cattle feed and everything. So there was a lot of work to be done. So they all came together.
And your father used to do the work in the farm?
All of the work, along with my older brothers, my 3 older brothers, and myself. I used to do a lot of work on the farm. And I learned to drive a tractor when I was about 12 years old. And so, we were never, we were always busy. And you never said you were bored in front of my dad, because there was always something to do.
So what triggered the process of going on that journey?
So actually, I was about 12 or 14 years old when my father had a heart attack. And then about a week later, he had a stroke. So, things looked increasingly worse, and we were expecting that he wouldn't live through it. And I was sleeping with my mum at that time, just for company. And I remember waking up one night and I could hear her. She was on her rosary bead. She was praying. She was crying. I was, pretending to be asleep next to her and just listening to her. And, actually, when I think about it now, it makes me emotional. She was so distraught. She didn't know what was going to happen and when she was going to lose him. And in my so young teenage years, I said to God that night in the bed, I said, oh, please God, let my dad live. And if you let him live, I will dedicate myself to a religious life. I will become a nun.
Oh.
Yes. And so, because I was only a child, and, to hear my mum really distressed about this situation with 10 children, and there was no kind of government aid at that time. This was way back in the 60s, it was really, really difficult. So anyway, my father got better.
He improved?
Yes, alhamdulillah, he improved, he got better. He did have some difficulty with his coordination and so on, but he made a huge improvement, and it was fantastic. And he came home, and it was very sad. It took him a long time to sort of get back into working on the farm again and so on and so forth. But he managed it, mashallah, and things improved and got better. And then, as I was towards the end of my boarding school, I began to remember this promise I made. Oh my God, I made this huge promise, and my dad, he recovered and so on. What am I going to do? So it was my 5th year. I was at the end of my boarding school years. I was going to leave after doing my leaving cert, or probably A levels here in the UK. What am I going to do? So I remember going to church, and we went to confessions to confess our sins, which were fairly innocent at the time, I can tell you. And I remember asking the priest, telling him the story when he said to me, is there anything else you'd like to talk about? And I said, yes, when I was 14 years old, I promised this. And he shouted at me and he said, you made the promise and your father got better.
So you have to fulfill it.
You have to fulfill your promise, So I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do now? And it wasn't that I didn't want to fulfill the promise. I was just kind of not... I just didn't know, because I was too young to have any kind of worldly experience to know what to do and how to do it and so on. So then I met one of my friends when I came out of church, and I told her what had happened, because I was crying at the time. And she said to me, oh, don't be ridiculous. You were only 14 years old at the time. Your father was dying. You would have promised anything. So, but that didn't really relieve me of the situation. I told my mum. And my mum was a lovely person. She was such a gentle mother. And I said to her, Mum, this is what happened. And she said to me, look, I know that that was a difficult time for all of us, me in particular. She said, why don't you just leave? And then she said, go out and sort of get some experience and see the world a little bit and so on.
Leave what? Leave the country?
Leave the convent, leave school, go out and work and so on. And then, if you still feel that that's what you want to do, go back. But, at least you should have a little more experience, before making such a huge decision.
So mature a bit.
Yes. Yeah. So I did, and I went to work in Dublin, and I was there for some years. And at that stage, I think even, looking back on it now, I think the issue about joining a religious order was becoming difficult for me, because I was beginning to experience difficulties with Christianity and Catholicism theologically.
After you left the convent?
Not well, sort of on the journey up to the end of my education and my boarding school years, and after I had left the convent. So I was beginning to. There were little cracks and flaws in the theology of Christianity that were worrying me, and I think that's, looking back on it now, I think that's really what made me hesitant about joining the religious order at that point. You know, not the fact that my dad had got better and I should abide by my promise and so on, but the fact that I really worried about my sense of commitment at that time. So I went to Dublin and I began to explore things. I was still attending church. I was still sort of very committed as a believer and so on, but I was slightly doubtful. And so I began to attend different things and meet different people. And I happened to meet, after a few years in Dublin, I happened to meet some Malaysian students.
In Dublin?
In Dublin. And they were
most probably doing medicine.
Yes, medicine. And also there was a very large contingent of them that were studying aircraft and engineering at Dublin Airport with Aer Lingus. And they were with Malaysian airline systems. And so I got to know these people, and I loved meeting people from abroad. I loved meeting people from outside of Ireland. I loved exploring various different cultures and so on, because Ireland was very insular, you know. We had very few people from abroad, and it was such a huge opportunity to meet other people. Anyway, I met them and I enjoyed their company, and I used to go and have meals with them and everything. Religion really didn't come up as a subject until I noticed that there were things about their behavior and their attitudes towards certain things and their perspectives on life that I thought, this is quite odd, actually. You know, why do they think like this? What sort of spurs them on to look at things in that particular manner? And then I began to ask questions about that and about their attitudes and behavior, how they dressed, their relationships between each other and their families and their parents and so on. And then they started talking to me about Islam and about the fact that from a religious perspective...
That was about the mid-70s, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
When the Malaysian government was sending a large number of students.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Very interesting time.
I was a student here myself at the time.
Yes, yeah. And the Malaysians were really a lovely people, really. You know, they are lovely people, and they're very polite, and they have a lot of respect, you know, about how they speak to people and interact with people and so on. So anyway, I was really impressed by the whole thing. And they said to me, well, we go on Friday evenings to a place in Dublin, and we all meet together and we have a kind of a religious meeting and so on. And I thought, okay, well, I'll sort of mosey on down there and see what's going on. So I did. And I used to go every Friday evening and just listen and hear them talking. And then I was introduced to the Quran. And there was no pressure, no stress. Nobody was saying to me, oh, you should convert to Islam. No, nothing at all. I just went there, I sat there, I listened, I left, and I got on with my work and whatever.
Was that at the Islamic Center?
No, there was no Islamic Center at all in Dublin at the time. There was a place called, it was 7 Harrington Street. So it was next to the Garda Club, and it was Friday night, and we used to be sitting there talking about religion, and next door we would hear the thump, thump, thump of the discotheque starting, you know, next door. So it was really interesting. But we had no mosques, we had no halal meat, there was nothing there, you know, of any Islamic significance at all in Dublin at the time. And so, really, I spent quite a few years going there before I made my decision.
So that was a long process, really.
It was, because I think, you know, I come from a family of 10, so I was going to have some big issues with my family, you know, about converting to Islam.
And a very religious family too.
Yes, I mean, and we were a very close family. a very loving and united family. My parents were wonderful, wonderful people. And so, you know, you have a great deal of trepidation while you're thinking about, you know, the hurt and the pain that, you know, this is going to cause them. And so it's, you know, you're hesitant to, not hesitant to convert to Islam and to believe that Islam is the right thing, but to be able to break that news to your family.
You worry about the repercussions.
Yes, very much so. And if you ask me now, even in the age that I am now, what has been the most painful thing for me in my entire life, and particularly since I became a Muslim, I would have to say it was the pain and the anguish that I caused my parents on my conversion.
How did they react when they knew?
They were devastated. They were devastated, and not in a way, I mean, they weren't devastated because, you know, because they hated Islam or they hated Muslims. They didn't know anything about Islam or Muslims. In fact, neither did I. I was not aware of Islam at all until I met these Muslims.
Maybe your parents thought they were losing you.
It's not so much the fact that they think they're losing you. I think parents who, you know, when parents bring up their children, they instill in their children a set of values. You know, they want to build your character and personality to be one that's going to, you know, benefit society, that's going to be out there and you are going to be a moral compass for everybody else that you meet out there. And so they give you these values and they give you these characteristics and so on, because that's what their parents passed on to them. And from a religious perspective, that was the kind of personality and character that they felt was something that they wanted to pass on, was a gift. It was the most valuable thing that they could pass on to their children. And so in a sense, it's almost like that you are, you know, you're being slightly treacherous to your family because you're turning your back on all the things that they have believed in to be the right things to do.
Were you disconnected?
You know, when I look at all of the things that my parents taught me, I mean, they're not any different to really what I am as a Muslim. To be a thoughtful person, to be honest, truthful, straightforward, to have a character and personality that's going to benefit humanity, benefit humankind, to give, to sacrifice, to be selfless, all of these things. My parents taught me those things. And so was I cut off? Yes, I was cut off, but on hindsight, I think I was cut off only because the way I went about telling them about the fact that I was Muslim and so on was with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. You know, I just literally hit them with it.
So retrospectively, would you have done it a different way?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I've always been in the business and in the work of looking after converts to Islam and taking care of them and advising them what to do. And also advising them, you know, how to understand that, you know, as Muslims, the respect that you give to your parents is paramount after the respect you give to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
I remember when I was at Markfield between 2000 and 2004, when I was lecturing there, you were in charge of a unit that took care of Muslim converts.
Yes.
Are you still doing the same thing?
Well, I'm still doing the same thing. I've left Markfield, you know, almost left Markfield and that particular work, but I've started up something different now. It's something, well, not so much different, but I think it's an acceleration of the work that I used to do there. Because when I was there, we looked after converts to Islam in relation to the basic requirements and the basic support and help that they would need in coming into Islam. Alhamdulillah, I have to say that across the whole of the UK now, we've got all of sorts of organisations and local groups who are looking after the needs of converts to Islam locally. And they're doing a fantastic job. But now I've started up a new organisation myself, which I hope is going to be something that will carry on well into the future. I've started it up I will be retiring very soon, and I hope that it'll be taken up by the convert community and carried on. And it's called the Convert Muslim Foundation. And that's looking at the needs of the convert community now, sort of elevated to their size and their development, and the increase that has been in the convert Muslim community over the past maybe 10 or 20 years.
Now, is there any organization that has data on the number of converts, or is this something difficult to
it's difficult
compile?
To accumulate that kind of data, simply because we have so many thousands of mosques all over the UK now, and a lot of the mosques have not been managed properly, and over the years they have never kept any files or any detail of people who have converted to Islam through their mosques or doors and so on. So only now, with the help of organizations like MCB and sort of mosque organizations within specific towns where mosques are coming together collectively and looking at their governance and so on, and how they're running their mosques and what kind of administrative support that they have. And now I think that they're more organized. And until now, nobody's ever done that kind of research work.
Now, when you had the rejection from your family of what
Yes.
You decided to do,
Yeah.
was that what motivated you to leave Ireland and come here, or you came here for different reasons?
Yes, more or less. I mean, my father was devastated, and he wept openly in front of me, and he was devastated, and that was very difficult to deal with. My mum, on the other hand, was your typical mother. She was incredibly upset. She was very loyal to my dad, but she was determined that she wasn't going to lose me. And so, yes, I did leave Ireland, but that was because I got married. I happened to be in the mosque in Dublin one Friday evening. It was after Christmas in 1982 or 3, I can't remember. I mean, I converted to Islam in 1979. And so I was in the mosque, and somebody came in and told me that there was this man who was visiting Dublin, visiting some friends in Dublin, and he wanted to get married. So I was suggested.
This is like arranged marriage, isn't
Yes,
it?
absolutely. Oh, totally. So I remember they said to me, he's down, he's in a room at the back of this, house that we were using as a centre. And I said, okay. And I was sort of thrown into it at the deep end. I was really it was a bit awesome. But anyway, I went down, and I remember leaving the room that I was sitting in, where we were doing a kind of a study circle. And I remember between that and walking to the room where he was, I remember reciting Al-Fatiha to myself. And then I walked into this room, and this gentleman was sitting there with his friend, and his wife was the person who escorted me down there. So she sat there as well, and I sat down.
The friend's wife?
Yes. Excuse me. And I remember sitting there in that room, and I remember answering a few questions that I was asked. And I guess I still was really quite naive, although I was around 27 at the time, 27 years old at the time. And I remember I asked a few questions, answered a few questions on, and I didn't dare look at him. I just sort of could see a vague outline to my left, and so on. So then they suggested that I should come round to their house the next day, on Saturday. So I went round to their house, and I met this gentleman again. And I thought, okay, I wasn't, I wasn't averse to the whole idea. And then they came round to the house where I was staying with a Malaysian couple on the Sunday morning. And we were married on Sunday afternoon.
So quick.
Yes. I mean...
And that's why you moved here.
Can you blame my parents for being so upset? Yes, I mean, I moved here over to England. He was living here in England at the time. So it was just a matter of me moving. But I had to give up my job. I had to pack up lock, stock and 2 smoking barrels and then move everything over here to the UK. And we lived in Leeds first. My husband was called Abdul Jabbar, Allah yarhamu. He passed away about 4 years ago.
He was at Markfield.
Yes.
Rahmatullah
He
alayhi.
was a very quiet man. He was a wonderful Muslim. He was a very quiet man, a very shy person. And he was from Iraq. We had 4 children, but we moved over to Leeds and we stayed there for about 10 years, maybe, or 8 years. I had 3 children, a boy first, Tariq, and 2 girls. And then I decided to go to Wales, to the University of Wales, and study Islamic studies and comparative religions. So I think we moved to Wales in about 1988 or 89. And then I spent 3 to 4 years there. I had another child, and we came back from Wales to Leicester with 4 children. And then I took up residence in Markfield, and I was working at the Islamic Foundation.
And you've been here since?
And I've been here since, yes.
Well, Sister Batool, it's been really a great pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. And
Thank
to you too. The pleasure was all mine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
قل يا أهل الكتاب تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم ألا نعبد إلا الله ولا نشرك به شيئا ولا يتخذ بعضنا بعضا أربابا من دون الله فإن تولوا فقولوا اشهدوا بأننا مسلمون